When we moved to palliative care, it was like moving into a safe space. The noise went away, the fear went away. I think there was grief, but, lots of love. There was like room to breathe.
Hi, Betsy. Welcome to Hold the Moment. So to kick things off, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your husband, Peter?
Peter was diagnosed with young-onset dementia at the age of 63, and he passed away late last year at the age of 66. It was pretty quick. He lived with dementia 3.5 years, and it was a pretty intensive time for all of us. Peter was a very courageous person and a really good person, and I look back on the time that we had while living with dementia, and I saw my role as a carer as helping him keep his dignity. But I really see now how courageous it was, what he did, putting himself out there, every day, trying to get out, do things, see people, when he had so many, challenges with aphasia and then, physical loss of ability to do tasks and things like that. So I think it's easy for me now, a year down the track, to look back and see the positive things, how well we lived right until the end, how courageous he was. Like I said, he was supported really well by his friends, his family, and, while no one wants to have a young onset diagnosis, it's kind of what you do with it that counts, I think. And I feel like I look back and I'm really, really happy at what we did with our time together.
Was that an overt conversation that you had together about how to approach it, or this was just how he did it and how you did it, and it somehow magically worked?
Yeah, it's funny. We didn't have a lot of what you would think would be conversations about it. I think there was a little bit of me knowing what he wanted and some very specific instances of him expressing things to me. And I call them the 3 things that he wanted. One being to live at home, even though I had explored some, residential living options with him. And 2 was to have a family holiday, the 4 of us, with our 2 daughters. And this had to be after the Olympics. So I don't know if you're aware, my younger daughter was in the Olympics. And so she came home in August. And then Peter passed away in November. So we had some really great time together, including that family holiday. And the 3rd wish of his was he, in not a lot of words, he made it quite clear he didn't want to be sustained in a way that, where his living was compromised. And he said it quite kind of like, when I get like this, but I knew what he was trying to say. So he didn't want to live in care. He didn't want to have to be, in a bed or, restrained. And, and that gave me focus, and, having him, helping him live with dignity gave me purpose. And yeah, so it was really hard, but at the same time, there's a sort of satisfaction that comes from fulfilling his wishes and knowing I did everything I could to give him the quality of life that he wanted.
So was there any particular thing that sparked this conversation? What actually got you both talking about whether he was potentially going to have palliative care or something like that? How did that come about?
They were random conversations. So every day, so in the last year, he had a lot of challenges with aphasia. So there were a lot of conversations where I actually don't know what he was trying to say to me. I could only guess.
Maybe also if you could just explain for listeners what aphasia is.
Aphasia, it's when you have verbal challenges with the words that you want to say and you formulate in your brain. Somehow they get jumbled up between brain and your lips, and they come out, and it comes out as like mishmash. Like you don't, some words might make it through, but a lot of times it's just like verbal, just confusion. But I guess I look at it and say, well, it wouldn't have changed anything. No. I knew him well enough to know what he wanted. And like I said, I thought, maybe we should move closer to family. Maybe we should move into residential care. And then you have a clear path, right? You have, independent living, assisted living, dementia care. And then, but that would have been for me. I wanted a clear path.
Yeah.
Like he didn't want a clear path. He wanted to be where he wanted to be, which was home. He had his people, he had his coffee shop, he had his support worker. And, that scared me to say, like, we'll live here and just take it as it comes. But, it actually turned out, I guess, as well as it could be.
I just want to bring you back to the decision about keeping him at home, because I think that is a particular pressure point for a lot of families, a lot of partnerships, living through a dementia journey, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, there may be a time where it's not actually in their interest to be at home. So how did you weigh all of that?
Yeah. So I think when we were in the last 12 months, and I started thinking about trying to move us into a facility which was going to offer a care path. And that was me. And I said, let's go visit this place. And it was after that that he told me, and is fairly in his way, that I want to stay here. I think those were the words he used.
At home.
At home. And, all I could say was, okay, well, we'll stay here as long as we can. And that's all I could say, because I didn't know if at some point down the track,
What was ahead?
it might be too hard for me. Right? So at that point, I could say, okay, and be okay with it. But I didn't know whether 6 months, 12 months down the track, I'd have to make a different decision. And, he had some issues with wandering at night, which is obviously a concern, and, some challenging behaviors. And at the end, it became unsafe for him and for us. So at the point where he went into hospital and then eventually palliative care, I knew that he couldn't come home again and be safe. And so it happens that he didn't come home. He went, he was in the hospital for a week, and talking to people about, well, what can we do? The first thing I heard was, well, a young, strong male is not going to, it's going to be very hard to find a placement for him. So I'm like, wow, that's okay. That's not good. It just, I think it became evident after a few days that he was resisting nourishment, and I was advocating for him, don't intervene, and I feel that in his way, by going into hospital, he was deciding for himself, well, that's it then, right? I'm not to be fed, not to be, treated. And we had that conversation about, what we would do, with that we wouldn't intervene. And then, but in a hospital setting, there's lots of people that want to help.
Of course.
Come in with food and, things like that, medicines. He ran a fever, for example. And I just had to say, no, we're not going to intervene. And that he wouldn't want that. So, I know the decision to put him in a care setting was probably going to come at some point. I didn't know when. And I guess I just put that in that we'll deal with it when it happens. And it just turned out that, he was at home right up until the end.
So someone listening to this might think, well, what's the difference whether they go to hospital or whether it's palliative care? Why do I need to think about this? What, in practical terms, for you as a family, as a partner, what was different about going into palliative care compared with, say, staying in the hospital?
Okay. Well, if you've ever been in a hospital setting, it's chaotic. It's noisy. You talk to a lot of different people day to day, hour to hour. And I guess you find yourself telling the story. It's the same story over and over to different people who are coming to, offer their help. It was frightening. We didn't know what was going to happen minute to minute. And after a week, when they said we're going to move him to palliative care, we'd had discussions about he might pass away during the night. So I guess it wasn't like we didn't think he was coming home. We thought, okay, I guess we could be at end of life. And then when we moved to palliative care, it was like moving into a safe space where the noise went away, the fear went away. I think there was grief, but, lots of love. There was like room to breathe.
You mentioned a holiday that he wanted to go on, and you did go on that holiday. Your daughter had been to the Paris Olympics. She was in is it called the swim?
The artistic swimming team.
Artistic swimming. And you went to a place that you'd been many times before as a family.
Mhm.
But something happened while you were there. There was a particular moment that you, I think, reflect on as kind of critical in Peter's journey when he was in the water. Can you share that with us?
Oh, okay. We went to a place in Queensland called Mooloolaba, which we used to take the girls to maybe once or twice a year. We went there a lot. So we got there and everything was quite okay. I think he felt the familiarity of the place because he was pretty settled. And then I had made the decision we're going to go to Brisbane and see these relatives that he's very fond of, and we did that, and it was a beautiful get together. It was just, I look back on it, he was so happy. But instead of going back to Mooloolaba, I made this decision: we'll go to a new place. And I look back on it and go, oh God, why did I think that going to a new place would be a good idea? It wasn't a good idea. And so we went to this second area, this new beach, and that got him very agitated. And I realized, wow, that was not a good decision on my part. Live and learn. But it was only 3 days. I think we'll tough it out. Then on the last day we were there, we went down to the beach. It was a beautiful day. We had just one daughter with us at that time. And even though it was a surf beach, just there was a sandbar that created this sort of pool between the waves and then the shore. And we were able to walk into that shallow pool, and I just saw this transformation where Peter, he recognized it was the ocean, but he was able to float and not be scared.
Yeah.
And it was just a beautiful moment where he kind of was finally able to be free, let go, float there, enjoy himself. And I was thinking, oh man, this is the last day we're here. We've just gotten to the point of, we got it now. But that's how it is. I think it was, I'm very grateful to have that moment, and like all of the moments that, all the good moments that we had, even, right up to the end.
Do you think that was on his wish list, that holiday?
It was.
Do you think
yeah.
having that come true and him having that experience, do you think that was impactful on him? Do you think he sort of had some connection with, this is a big tick for me?
I think he did. I know even when he was in the hospital, there was awareness there of some things, not everything. But things like that, like even, for example, when our daughter was at the Olympics, he had to watch from home, but he was so riveted. He knew, right? There wasn't any question about him knowing what was going on. He never forgot who we were, and I know that can happen, but that didn't happen with us, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
Within a week of that beautiful moment in the water at Mooloolaba, you're back, you're in palliative care. It's your 25th anniversary. Can you talk us through that morning?
Once Peter had been moved into palliative care, it was the day before, and I said, this day is just for us. I said that to the girls. This day, no visitors, no one else. This day is just for us. And we spent the whole day in the room with Peter. And, one daughter was drawing, another one was, maybe playing music. And it was just so sacred. It was really special. And because comparing that to coming in the middle of the night because you think something bad's going to happen, you could just be present. And it was very peaceful. And so the next morning, I said to the girls, just sleep in. I'll go in early because I wanted that time with Peter. I wanted to have just us time. And I went, it was probably early, like 7:30 or something. And of course the ward's quiet. You can just go to the room. You don't need, have to navigate anything. And I just sat there with him, and we probably had about 4 hours, just him and I. And you just reflect on, so many things, but, I think the good things, right? How it all came about, how we met, how, came to Australia not knowing what Australia had in store for me, but found Peter, found my country that I call home now. There's so much great stuff there that I could just think about and hope that he retained some of that. And then the girls came in around lunchtime and they brought us some flowers, which was lovely. And then, in the quiet, his breathing changed and we could just sense what was happening. And we were all sort of holding our breath and listening for probably what felt like about 15 or 20 minutes. And it just ceased. And it was so peaceful. And we weren't even sure, did that just happen? But, we were all there. So we went and called for the palliative care doctor and he came and checked and he said, yes, he's gone. So, but when I look at that time and then the time after when you're allowed to stay, oh gosh, so grateful to be there, with him when he essentially let go. I don't know if I ever pictured an ending that peaceful or that, beautiful, honestly.
So lovely to hear that it was a peaceful and lovely experience, which is such a difficult situation, isn't it?
Well, I think it's such a contrast to most of the stories we hear
Yeah.
about dementia. The drama, the high and the low emotions that come, but to have an end that is
On that anniversary.
dignified,
Yeah.
that must mean a lot to you now.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And
And to your girls.
yeah, for all of us and for his legacy. Like I
Yeah.
said, when I talk about Peter, we talk about, he was just a great person, a great friend, great dad, great husband, everything. But it's only recently, probably in thinking about what I would want to say with you is that, he really lived courageously with dementia. And I'm just full of, I guess, admiration for how he chose to go about it. He had a couple of moments where he was down about, oh, I can't do this anymore, I can't do that. But most of the time he just got on with it. And that was Peter. That was him getting on with it right to the end. So in that last month of October, so we had the family holiday, but we also had 2 dementia morning teas.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for the Cup of Time fundraiser. And they were so joyful. There were so many friends and supporters that came and we were so happy. And then, a couple weeks later to say Peter's not with us anymore. No one could believe it.
No.
But just to know that he had so many happy moments right up until he didn't, I can't help but just be grateful for that. I'm sad too, right? Peter should have lived much longer, right? He should have had the opportunity to experience, things like watching his girls, grow up more, even though they're young adults. But what do? You just get dealt the hand you're dealt, and you just decide, well, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And, you can't come through something like that and not know, not be a better person.
Yeah.
I think you're stronger. The resilience is there. Who you can call on. That's going to be your network. And, your friendships and relationships are profoundly changed when you go through that experience together. So, probably going to get sick of this word, but I'm so grateful for that.
I think it's so good, and we're so grateful that you come in and shared all of that with us because it's so insightful. So thank you so much.
Betsy,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Hold the Moment is a podcast from Dementia Australia, produced by Deadset Studios.